Raiders! Welcome to Raiders Fan Radio. This is your Uncle Mosh coming to you from the Dago Dungeon. Join us as Raider Nation takes a lighter side journey with the worldwide fans of the dark side.
Okay, we're back. Look left, look right. Bolitnikov, a leaping pass. Touchdown!
We miss you. We love you. And we'll see you in the Hall of Fame.
When you have great coaches, then after you have great coaches, you get great players. You have a great organization, and you tell them one thing: just win, baby.
Intercepted by Khalil Mack. Touchdown! Raiders!
The Oakland Raiders have scored on the most zany, unbelievable, absolutely impossible dream of a play. Well, I love this team. I think this team can win.
What is up, Raider Nation? Your old buddy Murph back here again for another fantastic episode of Raiders Fan Radio. Thank you for joining us, as always, here for episode number 80. We always name our shows after a player, and so we will name it here quickly. But first, before we get to that, let's recognize that this is Memorial Day weekend, and so we want to pay our respects and give our thanks to those that paid the ultimate sacrifice and led us to where we are today with the ability to live in the freedoms and vote with the freedoms and all the wonderful things that our beautiful country has enabled us to has all come on the backs of those men and women that have sacrificed for us and again paid that ultimate price. So we express our deepest of gratitudes for that service and sacrifice from us here at Raiders Fan Radio. All right, so let's get started, and as always, we get started with hearing from our Uncle Mosh and how you can get a hold of us here at Raiders Fan Radio.
Hey, boys and girls, this is Uncle Mosh. That's right. Somebody actually claims Sonny and Murph. These two. Check them out on their website, RaidersFanRadio.com. You can friend them on Facebook at Raiders Fan Radio, or you can like their fan page at Raiders Fan Radio Podcast. Hey, I don't tweet. I don't even know how to use a Twitter, but they do. You can tweet them at Raiders Fan Radio. Call them. Leave a voicemail if you want. Go old school. 909-345-3346. That's 909-345-3346. Hey, do this. Please subscribe and rate Raiders Fan Radio on iTunes. You can listen to the show on all podcast services like Stitcher, TuneIn, Podcast Addict, and many, many more. Okay, am I done? Did I say all the stuff I was supposed to say? All right, I'm out of here.
Episode number 80. So this is kind of tricky, right? So when I thought about the episode and what player we were going to name it after, the first player that jumped into my mind, of course, was Jerry Rice, who some arguably could say that he was the greatest, not only wide receiver of all time, but maybe even the greatest football player of all time. The guy was just absolutely leaps and bounds ahead of any of his peers at his position, and just his dominance of the wide receiver spot really kind of, again, elevates him to that greatest of all time player conversation. But a thing that's tricky about Jerry is, well, number one, when we got him, he was already kind of on the tail end of his career, but the old adage was, well, Jerry was already 2 steps ahead of everybody else, so he could lose a step and still be good. But by the time that he made it to the Raiders, he had such a long-lasting career with the Niners and such an established, Niner career that I never really embraced him as a Raider, and I think that there's a lot of Raider Nation out there that would agree with me. I was thankful for what he did in a Raider uniform. I'm thankful that it got us to the position that it did, and that Super Bowl appearance and everything that, when they were the number one offense in 2002 and all. But still, I just never was able to fully embrace him as a Raider. So, and really, I'm going to point to one particular moment in time that really kind of tainted it for me. And so rewind the clock, those of you that are old enough to remember back, September 5th, 1994, and I'm intentionally not playing the audio from this because it was so painful. September 5th, 1994, Monday Night Football, the Niners crush the Raiders in Candlestick, 44-14. Okay. So with less than 5 minutes to go in the game, the Niners have a 37-14 lead in it. And Steve Young throws a deep pass 38 yards downfield to Jerry Rice, and Jerry Rice scores his third touchdown of the game and sets the all-time touchdown record, at what point the game stops, everybody rushes to the end zone, and they lift up Jerry Rice, and he's holding his arms up like he's, being anointed by the Almighty, and it's like this big freaking Jerry Rice celebration flying in the face of a major Raider defeat on national television. I'm sorry. Having things like that burned into my brain as a Raider fan, I thought of that nonstop the whole time he played for us in the silver and black. So that was a long way to get to this. I'm not naming this freaking episode after Jerry effing Rice, okay? We're going to name this episode after somebody that actually was a little bit of a light source for us during some really dark times. So we're going to name this episode after Zach Miller. Now, Zach Miller was a tight end for us in the late first decade of the 2000s. So let's go back to think about Zach. We're going to go back to October 18th, 2009, right? And if you remember 2009, like I'm talking about like the middle of the Jamarcus Russell era, right? So the dark times, but there was a really bright light, and one of those guys was Zach Miller.
Tight ends start from the 14. Russell throws and finds Zach Miller, the tight end. Miller breaks away. Still going, got a great block down the sideline. Inside the 20, inside the 10, he's in, touchdown!
The fans are going crazy here in Oakland. Here it is right here, crossing route behind the linebacker Trotter. Now, focus on Louis Murphy. You're going to see some wild blocks. One right here, bam, blows up Quentin Michael, and then he's going to keep going, and then he's going to screen off Ellis Hobbs. What a great job by Murphy and Zach Miller in working with the blocker in front of him.
And Zach Miller, who's become a favorite target of Jamarcus Russell, cashing in. But what hustle. Great effort by Louis Murphy on that play.
All right, there you go, Zach Miller. So we're going to name episode number 80 of Raiders Fan Radio after one Zach Miller. Zach Miller, Marcel Reese, even Louis Murphy, who you heard in that clip. There were some good players back then, and guys that really, there was so many other things going on with the Raiders. It was that led to all those dark times. We had some pretty cool players back then, and Zach Miller is definitely one of them. So we celebrate Zach here on episode 80 of Raiders Fan Radio. All right, so just a quick episode this week. We have a great interview with someone who's joined us before. This was back in October. One John Kingdon. John is the co-author of the phenomenal book Behind the Raiders Shield. Raider Nation, if you haven't checked out that book yet, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on the website, which we'll detail here in a minute. But I believe it's behindtheshield.net. But anyways, read the book. If you haven't read it yet, it's John, it's Bruce Kebrick, it's Steve Corcoran, guys that were, in the trenches with Al Davis for, in particular to John, 33 years he spent with the Raiders organization. And for the majority of that time, he was a confidant of Al Davis. So it's just an awesome insight. John is a phenomenal storyteller. He's like the official storyteller of Raider Nation to me. I mean, the guy, I could listen to him talk forever. And we get a good about an hour that we spend with John and talk a lot about Al Davis. So that's what we're going to feature here mainly on the show. But I do want to cover a couple of news stories first. Really, there was only two relevant stories that came out in Raider Nation this week. Number one was the trade for Christian Hackenberg. The Raiders spent a conditional 7th-round pick on him. They're going to take a flyer on him. It's kind of, the quarterback room after Derek Carr is way up in the air. Of course, we root for E.J. Manuel around here, but outside of that, I mean, why not? Why not take a shot at a 7th-round quarterback, right? But the more significant Raider story was, and it is Raider related, is the NFL and the owners voting on the new rules as far as the protest goes, as far as whether they stay in the locker room or they come out and kneel, and if they do, then they get the 15-yarder. Some of you may not know that two things here. Number one, Mark Davis abstained from the vote. Okay, so that's a Raider-related portion of that story. I'm not going to talk about the issue itself. It's too convoluted and too big of an issue to address with one guy here on a podcast. But what is significant here as far as Raider Nation goes is that our owner didn't participate in that vote. And so now you can take away from that whatever you want. Is that Mark Davis's way of protesting? Is that what is he actually communicating by not participating in it? Well, that's up to you to determine for yourself of what you think he's trying to say. But here's what I will say about it. It's what his dad would have done. And if you look at Al Davis's history when it comes to owner voting, very frequently Al Davis would abstain from the vote, whether that's a commissioner appointed vote, whether that's voting for a collective bargaining agreement. Anytime that there was votes put out there to the 32, oftentimes you see there's only 31 votes because Al would not vote. And now here his kid is doing the same thing. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that, again, whatever you want to take from it, that's up to you to interpret and decide for yourself. But the fact that our owner is abstaining from a vote on it and not participating in that, that's it. That's the Raider way, man. That's the renegade right there. And that's the Maverick spirit going from Al Davis and now carrying on with Mark Davis. So good for him. Okay, next up, Raider Nation Midwest. Okay, there's a Branson invasion going on coming up soon that is put on by the KC Raider Nation. Now, if you want any details on this stuff, go to KC Raider Nation. They're on Facebook. Again, it's called the Branson Invasion, and it's going on June 22nd through the 24th. Now, we kind of got brought in on this a little bit late this year, so unfortunately, we're not going to be able to make the trip this year, but next year, Raiders Fan Radio will be there, and we will be doing a live broadcast from the Raider Nation Raider Nation Midwest Branson Invasion. So again, that's June 22nd through the 24th. It's going on at the Clarion Hotel. There is different rates set up automatically for if you book as part of the group. Now get to it quick because I believe the cutoff is at the end of the month, which is just a few days away. So if you're hearing this before the end of May, get in on that. But you can still contact the hotel, and I'm sure they can accommodate you at 417-334-7666. So that is the Clarion Hotel. This is going on in Branson, Missouri, and there's all kinds of cool stuff going on around this, around the Branson Invasion. They have theme park tickets set up for the water park out there, and also for the amusement park, Silver Dollar City. And so again, contact the KC Raider Nation. KC Raider Nation is a great booster club out there, holding it down for Raider Nation in the Midwest. They do tons and tons of events. I know they give away a ton in terms of time and resources, so definitely support what they're doing. And if you can, be part of the Raider Nation Midwest Branson Invasion. Next up, the draft. The NFL draft in 2019, year of our Lord, is going to be in Nashville, Tennessee. That's right. So for those of you that don't know, I grew up in the Bay Area. Sonny and I and Uncle Mosh and all of us grew up in San Jose, California, and have since relocated to the south. And I live just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, where the draft is going to be this year. And we have already started planning. We are going to be coming to you live from the 2019 draft. That's right. Raiders Fan Radio will have boots on the ground. We will be right there in the middle of it all. And so no fan left behind, man. We are definitely going to bring you all the Raider-related content we can from the draft. What that's all going to entail yet, we're going to hold back on making any announcements, but just know we will be right in the middle of a lot of it. And so look forward to not only that event, something that I've always wanted to do personally, but look forward to what we can do from a show perspective and what we can get out there to Raider Nation, listening to us all over the world, right here from the epicenter of the 2019 NFL draft. Hopefully the Raiders will be picking really low. You know what I mean? But we will be there. All right. So I got one more thing, and then we're going to get to the interview. I almost forgot about it. So last week, we got back to the Return to Excellence audio clips. There was a Return to Excellence CD that came out that's an audio documentary of the Raiders season in the year 2000 when John Gruden brought us back to excellence. And it's a week-by-week detail of the winning games. And so this week, I'm going to feature one more because we got some phenomenal feedback from you out there on the last episode, on us bringing that back. So I'm gonna keep it going. Plus, this is right in the middle of John Kingdon, our guest's heyday with the Raiders, as you'll hear in the interview, some of his favorite times with the organization. So we'll listen to the next cut of this. It's a blowout win against the Browns. A lot of fun. Again, same thing. Set up by Greg Papa. You get the calls from the game. You get player and coaches interviews along with it. It's great stuff. So I'm going to play the John Kingdon interview. Then I will, at the end of the show, we will tag it with that Browns blowout win from the year 2000. So that's all we got for you this week, other than the John Kingdon interview, which I know you will love because the man is, as I mentioned, is a phenomenal storyteller and tells a lot of great Raider Nation stories firsthand that came right out of the offices of one Alan Davis. So thanks again for joining us on episode number 80. We will be back next week for episode number 81. And no doubt we're going to name that episode after, right, Raider Nation? And it's not going to be number 81, Pharaoh Brown. But anyways, enjoy the interview with John, and we will catch up to you next week. All right, Raider Nation, please welcome to Raiders Fan Radio, a man that began working for the Raiders back in 1978, where he worked his way up to becoming eventually the director of college scouting and a confidant of one Al Davis. After 2012 leaving the team, he decided to become an author, and he penned a phenomenal book with Bruce Kebrick and also Steve Corcoran, friend of the show, Steve Corcoran, now of RaidersSnakePit.com. But this man decided to pen this book, and it's phenomenal. It's a fantastic read, and it is something that should be in every Raiders fan collection, certainly. And we are talking about one John Kingdon. John, welcome to the show.
Sure, thanks so much. Pleasure to be back with you.
Well, it's great to have you back. You know, John, we spoke to you last year. It was in October, and we had, such a great time talking with you. We wanted to get you back on and discuss a few more things that kind of came to us after the fact. And also I guess they rehired this coach in between last time we talked too. So that might be something to come up today, huh?
By all means, one of my favorites.
Well, first off, before we get into, obviously we want to talk about the book. We want to talk about your experience with Al and kind of reflect on what that would have looked like nowadays with the return of John Gruden. But first, let's talk about you a little bit. That's something we didn't really get a chance to last time. Tell us a little bit about your kind of background and your history and getting involved with the Raiders. We know you spent a long time with them, but in 1978, take us back to that. What does that look like for you when you started your career?
Well, I got my master's in sports management at the University of Massachusetts, and I was looking at an internship. Big fan of the Raiders growing up, even though I was in New York. And, a lot of times it's timing. Someone had gotten fired. They'd gotten my resume in front of them. And I've been persistent, and they asked me to come out for an interview. Actually, I didn't meet Mr. Davis there. In fact, there's a guy named Steve Ballard. And, they said, come on out. And I came out in August of 78, pretty much started at the bottom, picking up players. And it was exciting, to sort of step into pro football. It's so much different then than it is now. I mean, when I got there, maybe there were 25 people in the entire organization, outside, if even that many, outside of the coaches, and I was doing a little bit of everything, helping out in PR and taking off schedules. But I really wanted to work in personnel, and I just would kind of walk over to that department, anything you need, and eventually it became a full-time position. When you decided to take the job and you became full-time, what was your initial job with the team, and what did it start off with? Well, actually, my sort of the first job position was working as the coach's assistant under Tom Flores the next year. They had a guy, kind of a goofy guy, who would come in at like 4 o'clock, but he'd till like 3 in the morning, and I won't bring up his name. He's a nice enough guy, but Tom said, "Boy, I need somebody a little more reliable." And so I did that, and I didn't particularly, it wasn't a position with great future. It was more just administrative, and so I kind of kept pestering. I finally moved over to player personnel and entirely in 1981. That was under Ron Wolf, and I basically stayed there throughout the rest of my career.
So when you're working with player personnel, and it's, to me, I think it's one of the more interesting front office positions when you're evaluating talent, and especially when you're talking about scouting different colleges. What was some of your favorite players that you ever scouted, or who were some of the you had some amazing players during your run there. Who were some of your favorites?
Well, I guess Napoleon Kaufman, I really liked, and it was an interesting story on that because he was so out of character for somebody like Al to take, because Al always liked the big, strong back, and it was interesting because it was coming down to Napoleon or Tyrone Wheatley, but I know Al loved Napoleon, and I think in his heart he wanted to take Napoleon, and in his head he wanted to take Tyrone Wheatley, but it became a moot point because the Giants took Tyrone Wheatley one pick ahead of us, and I think Al was kind of relieved he didn't have to make that ultimate decision. And then the irony of it is that after the Giants let go of Tyrone Wheatley, we picked him up, and he became the player that everyone thought he would be. And it was actually a great compliment, the two of them, Tyrone and Napoleon Kaufman. And then Napoleon, fabulous, again, a wonderful person, played a couple more years, but, he was a strong, very driven religiously, started his own church and retired. And we had a great replacement for him in Charlie Garner, who again complimented Tyrone. And then this is what I'm doing now. I'm actually covering sports for a local paper, the La Miranda Weekly. Covers three high schools, Acalanes, Campo Lindo, Miramonte. And anyway, this Acalanes High School had a great year. They went to the playoffs, played a school called Bishop O'Dowd High School. And who's the coach of that high school right now? Napoleon Kaufman, and I got to see him, and it was really great to share moments with him. And he ended up winning the game. I had mixed emotions. I was kind of rooting for Acalanes, but I was certainly rooting for Napoleon. And actually, last year, the year before this, Napoleon's high school team won the state tournament in California in football.
That's great. Well, he's a great follow on Twitter. For those of you out there listening that don't follow Napoleon on Twitter, he's great. And yeah, he does. He mentions his team quite a bit, and he mentions obviously his faith and his ministry quite a bit as well. But he's great. I mean, he's a great follow. A lot of those Raiders, of course, Charlie Garner as well. You mentioned is a great follow. Of course, he probably talks more about UT football than he does Oakland Raiders football, but University of Tennessee, that is. But John, was that the most fun you had during your run? I mean, your run covered an extensive amount of time from, multiple cities and facilities and players and championships and whatnot. Were those years the most fun?
Which ones are those?
Those middle years with Kaufman and those guys, those middle, early 2000, late 90s era Raiders.
Well, it was more fun when we were successful.
Right. Right.
I mean, these guys were all characters. I mean, it was truly a great, entertaining group of people. Starting when I first, basically I started there, and basically the players were mostly older than I was, and then, towards the end, I could have been the father to most of the players on the team towards the end. So there was a genuine evolution in that regard. So, at the beginning, there are people that I sort of were fans of growing up, with the Upshaws and the Teddy Hendricks and the Stablers. I mean, I was just a fan almost at that point. And then when I sort of had some input in the selection process, I think that was another level. And then, you really had a lot more, input in the decision. So you really, you sort of rooted for the players a little bit more, the ones that you, pushed for the team to select. And then a lot of times, when you're playing a different team and there's a player on that team that you really wanted the team to take, they didn't take them, I sort of just internally kind of rooted for that player to do well, even knowing that whether I rooted for him or not didn't affect, but, it's sort of something you wanted the players you liked to do well and the players you didn't like to not do well. And then the ultimate contradiction was when the Raiders took a guy you didn't like. And I think we wrote about Sam Williams. I wasn't a big fan of as a player. Now, he's a wonderful person, and he kind of lived down to expectations. But again, I would always hope he would do well. at least outwardly. And, so it's sort of it's a very human aspect to all of this.
You mentioned Ken Stabler, and I'm glad you brought it up because there was something that I wanted to ask you about. We had Alexa Stabler on the show last week, Kenny's daughter. She's now started her own sports agency, and she's a representative of some players down there in that area of Alabama that they're from. And of course, it's just a brand new. She's in the infancy of her career, and we're going to look forward to watching her career grow in that arena. But we talked a lot about her dad, and of course, and being a Raider, and she shared quite a few stories with us. When you joined the Raiders, you were on the tail end of Kenny's time with the Raiders, and Stabler at a handful of different times in interviews said at the conclusion of his playing career, that he regretted leaving the Raiders, that he regretted kind of butting heads with Al Davis and what happened after that. Did Al ever talk about that? Was that ever, we know Al was a very prideful man, but and you having his ear in a way that you did and communicated him in a way that, a lot of us in the public didn't see. Did he ever make mention of that or ever talk about Kenny?
Not directly per se. Now, I like the fact, Al had, Al's, I think he knew he was passing away, and he had people at his funeral, and I'm sure he made note of who shouldn't be there, and Kenny was there, so I know that I'm sure that thing got worked out towards the end pretty well. I think there was a mutual regret both ways, that they kind of locked heads in a sense. But, my favorite story about Kenny, is unfortunate that I guess, as you read about, he had some issues mentally at the end, not remembering such. But to me, my favorite memory of Kenny at the end was at Al's funeral. The day Al was buried, they had a nice big luncheon. And I was sitting at a table with Kenny, Raymond Chester, I'll give you a name, Joe Scannella, who was a coach for many years. And Joe actually just passed away about a week ago. Was a wonderful man. But if you remember, the year that I worked with the Raiders, with Tom, it was an amazing year. If you ever look it up, it was the slowest Raider team in history. We had one wide receiver, Cliff Branch, who was very fast. We had two tight ends, which was Dave Castor and Raymond Chester. And we had two fullbacks, Mark Van Eegen and Derek Jensen, in the backfield. And because he had a lot of injuries, and it was a wonderful offense for Kenny because he could pick it apart, and it just built right into what his strength was at that point. So anyway, at this luncheon, I was sitting there, and there's Raymond and Kenny, and I said, "Oh, you remember you guys are two tight ends and this and that?" And just as an aside, that's the only team in history that ever had two tight ends make the Pro Bowl from one team. But anyway, I brought up that season rather. And Kenny and Raymond started talking about plays and specific games. And again, this was in 1979. So it was like 25 years later. And it was like they had played yesterday. So my last memory of Kenny was he was sharp as a tack, was having fun, and just talking about how much fun he had playing with the Raiders.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome, John. Hearing that is just, I think no matter what age you become a Raider fan, everyone always looks back at those years in the 70s is really the glory years of the team. And even despite the winning 2 Super Bowls in the 80s and and of course the run with John Gruden, those 70s Raiders teams, everyone just kind of looks back on those guys as the superheroes, and you hear stuff like that about just being there to see, Kenny and Raymond Chester chop it up like that. That's pretty cool. Did you ever get the sense that, Al was kind of chasing the ghosts of those teams, for lack of a better term, and the way that he approached the game from a you mentioned that was one of the slowest Raider teams, but we know that it was always speed with Al, right? Or it was size, or it was whatever, the way that he designed the man-to-man defense, and the way that just the offensive techniques, whatever it may be, the things that worked back in that time, in that era. Do you feel like Al was kind of chasing that from that point forward, or was he more of an innovator than that?
Well, I think it's interesting to bring that up, because I was just thinking about that this morning, that he liked to, I think, repeat things that he did that were successful. And I'm sure you've seen that Billy Cannon passed away today.
Yeah.
Was great player, and he was the first player that Al had converted from one position to tight end. Billy was a great running back, became a tight end, had great success. And then if you go down the line, we had Ethan Horton was a running back, made him a tight end, made the Pro Bowl. Derek Ramsey was a quarterback, made him a tight end, was a very fine tight end. I think he looks back when he drafted Gene Upshaw, and the reason he drafted Gene Upshaw was because he needed someone to take care of Buck Buchanan from the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, it didn't always work. We were going to take Todd Heath because I was it was in a court case. We put the whole draft together before he got up there. And then when he came up, he wanted us to draft Derek Gibson. And that one didn't work out that well, but I believe his philosophy at that point was, I'm going to need someone to take care of Tony Gonzalez. Now, on the surface, that made a lot of sense, but Derek Gibson was not the guy. He just was a size speed guy. But I think Al tried to repeat things that were successful in that regard.
So what about when it comes to coaching? Did you see that, and I bring that up because in the book, which is phenomenal, again, I'll mention it for those listeners out there that haven't read it yet. It's Behind the Raiders Shield. It's a great an account of different interactions and different times and things that Al Davis did during his career that these gentlemen had a front row seat in or were active participants in whatever was going on. And it's a really cool, if you ever want to be a fly on the wall or get that insight, that's what the book does. I'll tell you, I liken it to, nowadays we have on these shows like All or Nothing with the Dallas Cowboys, or they've done the Los Angeles Rams. You get you get a peer inside the facility, and you get to see what the coaches and what the owners are doing and what their interactions daily are like. That's really what the book is to me. And we didn't have shows like that back during this time with Al, and so we really get a peer into what was going on. And these gentlemen do a great job of authoring this book. So Raider Nation, definitely check it out. And so in the book, there are two chapters. One is John Gruden striking gold. The other one is John Gruden, the rock star. And it details everything that kind of happened to led up to John Gruden's hiring, his run of success, and then kind of what led to his departure from the team. And then the chapter immediately following is basically chasing Gruden by looking at Lane Kiffin. And did you get the sense, again, with that concept of chasing the ghosts of the past, do you get the feeling that Al was chasing Gruden after Gruden was gone? Do you feel like, whether that was Hugh Jackson or whether that was Lane Kiffin or whatever, do you feel like he was just looking to kind of repeat that like you had said earlier, like he had done previously with players?
I think in the case of Lane Kiffin, he thought he might have, a bright young guy that, was coming out. Not a lot of people do. And he was a very bright guy. The problem was he didn't quite fit in and really work with Al. I think John Gruden, had nothing but respect for Al and paid him a great deal of respect. Now, John did things the way he wanted to do it, and but he never kind of showed up Al, which is something I think Lane wanted to do. But I think Al. After we got rid of John, Bill was a nice continuation. And then we went to Norv, who was a very good coach, but that didn't fit. But I think the one time that Al was really trying to reach back was when he brought back Art for the second time, much to the chagrin of a lot of people, because it just wasn't going to work. But I thought Al saw Art as someone that would allow him he would just be someone that would sort of follow what Al wanted to say and wanted to do. And that just wasn't going to work. And then, so that's where Kiffin comes in. And then we go to Cable. And then, but now Hugh Jackson, I thought, it was someone that came in, was starting to do a pretty good job. And again, I think very much respected Al and didn't show him up. And they were working well together. And then, after Al passed away, they got rid of Hugh. And, again, they had to turn it around again. Dennis Allen didn't work. And Sperano didn't work, and they finally, go back. It's like a big circle. Now we're back with John.
In regards to Hugh Jackson, there's something that I've always wondered about as a fan. And, when Al passed away, Hugh was such an Al guy. I mean, he was highly emotional when Al passed. There was definitely, you could see, like you'd mentioned, there was a resurgence of the team. There was a very loyal, nucleus there around Al Davis, and Hugh was the guy that was kind of leading that. And I thought it was great. That was actually a really fun time, I thought, in the organization's history. But when Al passed, there was some, I'll never forget, at the end of that offseason, Hugh Jackson sitting in a press conference saying, he was going to take control of this. He was going to take control of that. He was going to have his hands in this. He was going to have his hands in that. And I kind of feel like he felt with Al's absence, he was going to automatically be thrust into these positions where he was going to have, this control over the organization. And I always felt like, again, I'm just a fan just watching things on TV, but I always felt like he kind of overshot his welcome a little bit there. I thought before anything was discussed or made official, I felt like the team was still trying to figure out how it was going to be ran. And here this guy is declaring himself the new, king. So is that the actuality of it? The way that we perceived it as watching it, is that what happened? Or was it just a matter of, look, Al's gone and we're just going to kind of start over again?
Yeah, I thought you maybe overstepped a little bit there and made some assumptions that, you've got a new owner. I think in retrospect, he probably should have run it by Mark first. I thought that was a mistake. Now, the irony right now, and I didn't talk about this in the book, I'll share this one with you, is, it's obvious now that John is running a lot of things. I'm not there, obviously, but from the outside, he has certainly taken a lot of responsibility, whether it's in personnel, you can see it in the draft, and other things, and the people that he's let go. And I find it ironic because I remember when John, was the coach, and I brought something by to him, and there was a guy named Bobby Ross, who was the head coach of the San Diego Chargers, a very good coach. And it came out that day that Bobby was going to be running everything, not just as a coach. And I never forgot, John said to me, boy, I love Bobby Ross. I've always studied his film. I was offense. I think he's great. But why would he want all that control? That's just too much work. The irony now is John is taking it all on. Now, maybe with computers and we got a lot more coaches and such, it's a little easier. But you can see that John is running things. You look at in the draft. That Tom Cable, was a fine coach, but when he was he was a terrible personnel coach. It's terrible in evaluating college players and pro players, and that shouldn't be the prerequisite to be a coach. But I remember we had signed a free agent named Quaim Harris. And it was just a guy just sticking around. So we said, and we're in the draft, and Tom Cable gets up and says, Quaim Harris, if he came out in the draft today, would be the number one offensive lineman in the entire draft. And we're looking around, like, what the heck is this guy talking? Anyway, Quaim lasted one season, and it was terrible.
Oh.
And then, Mike Mitchell, I think we write about Mike Mitchell in there, and, we had him in the 5th round. And that was probably higher than anyone else in the entire league had him. And the coaches went crazy. Oh, my God, we got to have Mike Mitchell. And then Tom Cable, we'll take him in the 2nd. Oh, my God, we can take him in the 2nd. I said, no, this guy, and anyway, we take Mike Mitchell, and he comes in and pulls the hair, doesn't do much. And he goes to the Steelers, and he was a tough kid who couldn't cover. He was a tight, stiff guy, but if you wanted a tough guy, and that's what the Steelers got, and I think he's on the street right now. But anyway, look, I hope Tom's right, for the sake of the Raiders, but I'm sure he had the input on those 2 picks. And then, again, this is my assumption, the player they took out of Sam Houston in the 2nd round, the short, stocky guy, very square nose tackle. Well, Paul Gunther is the coordinator, defensive line coach. That's exactly the kind of guy he had at Cincinnati that was very successful in his defense. So I got the feeling that those first 3 picks were coaches' picks.
So what does that look like? I believe someone close to you, Gruden, said to them that he would be willing to come back if he had a legitimate quarterback and he could have more control. And so what does that ultimately look like? I mean, we know that Reggie McKenzie is there as the GM, and we know that these guys know each other. I mean, they have, Tennessee connections and whatnot. So, I mean, it's not like, these guys, haven't been around each other in the past. So we know that they're fully aware of what the working relationship could be. But what does that look like? I mean, if you have a guy, I mean, we know what it looks like with, a Bill Belichick or once upon a time, Bill Parcells, right? But what is that the kind of role that John Gruden, you feel, has with the team now, and Reggie's more just like the contract guy, numbers guy? Like what, maybe has more influence on later rounds, because as you mentioned, it seems the coaches have the influence in the early rounds, certainly. So what do you see as best case scenario for this front office dynamic?
Well, first of all, I don't think Reggie's the numbers guy. I mean, they've got a cap guy. Every team has someone do that now full time. It's become a full time thing, trying to match it and squeeze everything in. And again, I'm just speculating, but I would imagine what it is John, lets Reggie know the type of players that he's going to want, to fit his kind of offense and what the defense coordinator is going to want. And I would assume he would make the staff then, give me a list of guys. John, works his heart on personnel. He did when I was there, and he'll hear the players we think will fit. John would look through, and again, this is my speculation. He looks through all of them and ranks them, and they kind of sit down and work it out together. And if I'm in Reggie's spot, and I think John's making a really bad mistake, you better be able to speak up and point that out. But if it's, I think if it comes down to Reggie or John, we're going with this guy, and let's just move on from there.
I ask you to speculate on something else too. Speaking of Gruden, and I guess here's the ultimate question, in to relate to where we're at now with the current Raiders and where we were at previously when Al was alive. Does Al ever endorse Gruden's return to the Raiders?
You know what? I don't know that it was a real, like there's some real negative issues with some players. I just, no, I don't see that there's a problem. No, I think, again, speculating. No, I think Al had great respect for John. I think he's really exactly what he wanted, someone who would work as hard as Al would, someone who loved the game as much as Al did, and someone who I really believe loved the Raiders almost as much as Al did. I don't know if anyone could match Al in that regard. So, yeah, I would think that from wherever he might be, it makes sense on so many levels.
And Al, and in the book, it comes out, and you've mentioned it in other interviews as well, that, Al was, you never wanted to challenge him publicly, but you could challenge him one-on-one or behind the scenes, and really, depending on your position, if you were accurate, and then Al would, he would embrace it, and he would even back down at times. And, it seems to me that Al would have, eventually have come around to the, a reacceptance of Gruden. But speak a little bit about that. Speak a little bit about the, we know Al as the hardline, egotistical, the guy that, the rebel, the maverick, the guy that crafted the image of the Raiders and the that hardline stance. But talk a little bit about the personal side of Al, that caring side of Al that tended to show up in the way that he related to his coaches and players.
He really was very family oriented. If there were issues with players, he would definitely get involved. I think staff people, if particularly family members, if they were sick or had passed away, he would do everything he could. Now, we had a guy who played for the team and worked for the team, and this is my favorite story, and I've never really mentioned it, and it's sort of out there, and I won't mention his name. But this is a guy who's been with the organization a long, long time, and he had a son, and this is many years ago, who had a brain issue. It was some problem, no one knew it. Al sent him to the top brain guy in the entire country, and it was diagnosed, and he had a very successful recuperation from it, and he's still alive and very, very successful. But that's the kind of stuff that Al would do, and the thing I always talk about, I hate death. Oh, I want to defeat death. I can't. And when people passed away, family members, he would get upset. He would genuinely be mad that people would pass away, but was very empathetic. When my dad passed away, I got a call from his secretary, Karen Otten. Mr. Davis wants to send flowers, and we got this enormous bouquet of flowers at my dad's funeral. And then Steve Corkman, Al obviously had problems with press, but when he heard that Steve Corkman's father passed away, he did the same thing. And it wasn't just people passed away, but if there were people that were sick, anything I can do, let me know. What can I do? That kind of thing. So that was a very human aspect of Al that was didn't get a lot of play, but very much was appreciated by the people in the organization.
Something else that never gets play is any humorous side of Al Davis. Or was he funny at all? Was he ever lighthearted and cracking jokes and cutting up about things?
He used to be a wonderful spokesman. He would he'd go to public affairs and he'd get up and speak, and he was very, very quick-witted and such. And he could be very entertaining. I think his best moment would be he loved to come when we would meet. Our scouts would come in December, and then we'd come in for about 3 weeks before the draft. And I remember Bruce Allen said, I wish the scouts were here every day of the year, because whenever you guys are in town, Al is so happy just to talk about things like, he just loved Kent McClellan as a player, Angie Koya as a player, Danny Connors. He loved these guys, because they were great, great players. And he would talk, Kent McClellan. Kent, who was another, I don't know if you recall, he was the first bump and run corner in the history of the NFL. And just an aside story, getting back to Al June, but I remember asking Kent, I said, when I first came out here, I'd hear, this guy was the first, that guy was the first, from around the organization. I said to Kent, he was a very quiet guy. I said, Kent, when I was growing up in New York, I used to watch the AFL games on TV, and Kurt Garrity used to say, "Here's Ken McClellan, the first bump and run corner." But I always hear other names. He says, "I was the first." I said, "Really? Now, how did that come about?" He says, "Well, it was at the 3rd and 4, and normally we lined up 7 or 8 yards. The guy ran a quick out, got the first down. The coaches are screaming at me." I said, "Well, how many anyway? Kent came up with that idea." But anyway, so the point was, Al would told the story that Kent had been a running back at Nebraska, and he thought he was going to be a safety. And said to Al, said, "Oh yeah, no, you'll be a safety. Don't worry, you'll be a safety." And he used to always tell this story. And so when Kent was a rookie, started running out the safety spot. I said, "Hey, where you going?" So over there, says, "Get over that cornerback." And the two of them just started laughing about it, because Kent was a very, very fine corner. And we had Angelo Koya. You should look up. Angie was a wonderful guy, very good scout, played for you. He followed Al to the Citadel. And then when Al left the Citadel, went to USC, he went with Al to USC. So there was great loyalty. And it was a very, very fast running back and could have made the Olympics. But Al tells the story that, at the Citadel, those people are so stupid. We're down by 5 points with a minute to go. Who are they kicking off? These dumb so-and-so. Kick it to Angie. Takes it for a touchdown. You'll believe that. And they're laughing. It was just kind of fun stuff like that, just to flash back. And he says, he gets called back with a penalty. They kick it to him again. He almost breaks it again. But he loved flashing back with these guys. Danny Connors, he would tell stories about Danny. And Danny, I said to Danny, "How was Al as a coach?" He said, "He was great. He was fabulous." But, it was tough. He's standing there with Pete Vanderzack, and, it's something during practice. And Al would point to him and, "Hey, stupid, get over here." "Hey, Pete, he's talking to you." No, Danny, he's talking to you." Back and forth. So those were just fun times to talk about that. And that's, I think, when Al was his most relaxed, when he was just hanging out with the scouting department.
And he loved being known as a coach, right? Like, again, going back to Hugh Jackson, like Hugh Jackson always referred to him as coach. And even when you hear other players talk reverently about Al, they talk about him being a coach and about his football mind. Is that, and you mentioned that was really when he was at his happiest, huh? Like when he was, did he ever never really stepped away from that, huh? He was always kind of a coach at heart?
Pretty much, yeah. And I think he very much appreciated the coaches. I remember "Hey, Coach Davis." I think he loved kind of that title. It's sort of, it's like, the president is always going to be the president. he's a coach. He'll always be a coach, and he obviously watched more film than anybody. He would always input stuff. Some was good, some was not so good, and I think I talk about John. Always listen to what he said, and he'll always try it out. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't in practice. Some people have tried it in games, it didn't quite work, but I think we had great success in signing free agents. And a guy would come in, and you can't BS a player that comes in and pretend you know stuff. And a guy would come in, and you'd hear, gee, why'd you sign with this? Well, I was talking to Mr. Davis, and he mentioned, in that play in the third quarter when you had blitz on and you had a single coverage, blah, 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 blah. And I think those guys really loved the fact that Al actually watched the film and understood it and could talk to him in technical terms.
So how did Al look at the contemporary coaches, people like Belichick and even, Parcells or what? How did he view those guys? Any interactions with Belichick or any of those of the current crop of coaches that are considered some of the best?
Well, he loved Belichick. I did start with Parcells. He loved Parcells. In fact, we had a guy, George Harris, who worked for a number of years. George coached Parcells at Wichita State. Very, very close. But the thing I really liked about Bill Belichick, who I didn't know personally, but Al used to, during the draft when I got there, Al would get a call from someone. He'd get up, leave the room, and take the call and come back. And that last decade, it was difficult for Al to get up and move. So he would take the calls, right in the room, and Bill Belichick's on the phone, and he'd take it up, and hey Bill, how you doing? And the thing I really loved about Bill Belichick was that he always called him Coach Davis, not Coach, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis. He always called him Mr. Davis, and I always thought that had to do with the fact that Bill's father was a coach. So I think Bill had such great respect for coaches. There was always Mr. Davis this and Mr. Davis that, and when Lane Kiffin, hey Al this and Al that, it didn't quite come off that well. So that's what I loved about the respect that Bill Parcells. It's funny. There's another one. It was funny. Was Chuck Knox just passed away. So it's a great coach with the Seahawks for 8 years. And one time I'm walking with the combine. It used to be 3 different combines. It's just crazy. But we had our combine in Phoenix with 5 other teams, and I'm walking with Al to the field, and Chuck Knox is about 20 yards away, and he's behind us, and he goes, "Hey, Uncle Al! Hey, Uncle Al!" And Al turns around, "Hey, Chuck, how you doing?" Uncle Al! It was so out of character to hear Al dressed like that, and he loved it. So I think he truly had a love for coaches, because that's what he did. And but here people, and Chuck was on the same plane as Al like that. But in fact, I was with a guy named John Otten, and we looked at each other and just started laughing and appreciated how a different perspective of Al.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, so, I love hearing about the kind of the respect that the different coaches held Al in. And we know he butted heads with a lot of people over the years. At times different, occasionally a coach, but players. And one of the ones I had on my list here, what I did want to ask you about was, tell us a little bit about some of the interaction with Marcus Allen. We know that the kind of the abrasion is well documented. About what happened with them, and before Marcus went on to finish his career in Kansas City. But tell us a little bit about that, about how that interaction went down, and a little bit of what you observed and were a part of.
It was it started off. It was great, obviously, because Marcus, Rookie of the Year, MVP, Super Bowls. And a fabulous player. My favorite when Marcus comes to the team. I mean, he was he might have been the most all-round player in the history of football. He had everything but a great 40 speed, but he compensated because he could cut like Yale Sayers without losing speed. And I remember his rookie year, he comes into camp, and Al like that swing out of the backfield. And the pass was thrown. It was short, and Marcus kind of slid onto it. He was like flat on his back, and set it up where the ball comes in. And in one motion, he slides back up in the air. And everybody, this is a training camp, they just kind of look at each other and say, what the heck did we just see? And we realized we had something special here. And it went on. And then I think, part of it was, we talk about it, the people that Al had problems with, and made no sense with Kenny and Marcus and Gruden, who were becoming the face of the team. And I think Al was looking for a reason to kind of move Marcus out. And something I was thinking about, it occurred to me, if you look at 1985, Marcus was the MVP. We had great. So we're now in 1986. It's a funny year. You can look it up. We lose our first 3 games. We win our next 5. We then win 3 out of the next one. Now we're 8-4, and we're in. We have a home game against Philadelphia, a good team, Randall Cunningham. It's an overtime, and we're just like a play or two running in, kick the field goal. We're going to win the game. And Marcus, as competitive as it was, going to run it in, start the field, and he makes another cut, and the ball pops up in the air. A guy from the Eagles catching him midair, takes it down to the 1-yard line. They score on the next play. And I think from that point on, Al always had something against Marcus. Because always, he's a fumbler, which he really wasn't. But I think that was the one play that sort of gave Al an excuse to move on from Marcus. And he tried to do it with Roger Craig and Eric Dickerson, even Vance Mueller. And, there's a story where, he told the player, my favorite coach, my best friend in football is Terry Rubisky, who's the coordinator. We're at the end of the game, and, we need to score a touchdown. And he says, hey, Marcus, go in and give us a touchdown, which he did. And, he told me the story that Al caught him in the locker room, looked at him, said, you took me on, huh? And he kind of gave him a polite slap on the face. And I remember telling me, Terry told me the story, and then he told it publicly. He said, yeah, I put Marcus in and won the game. I got slapped in the face for it. But it was that play. If you look it up, we ended up losing our next 3 games. We ended up 8-8, and then we went on a pretty bad run until we brought back John Gruden. But I really think it was that one play that kind of just soured Al on Marcus, which is unfortunate because Marcus was great, one of my true favorites, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't really notice, and so just thought I'd share it with you.
How much did Bo Jackson come into play there? Was any of that used as an excuse to get Bo more playing time, or to, because obviously Bo was such an electric player, but then from a marketing perspective, I mean, he was the biggest thing in sports back then. Was there anything to that led to the treatment of Marcus Allen? If Marcus is the only guy on the block that can, handle the running game, does he get more favorable treatment, or does any of that change if it wasn't for Bo?
No, I don't think. I mean, that was a fabulous Marcus. Marcus again wants to play. They moved Marcus to fullback. Marcus was a fullback his first 2 years at USC. He was a fabulous blocker. Hey, there's nothing like Bo. How can you complain about Bo? I mean, Bo, to me, was the most exciting player. And I grew up with Jim Brown, Gale Sayers. I mean, Bo was so good that he made Jay Schrader a successful quarterback. It was like on 3rd and 8. Basically, the linebackers could drop deep, take away your passing zones. With Bo Jackson in the backfield, you had to keep your linebackers close to the line of scrimmage, because if Bo gets a running start, he's getting those 8 yards at least. So I think that really helped a lot. I just thought it was wonderful to see the two of them in the backfield. I don't think that was. I don't think Bo was brought in to replace Marcus. First, Bo would only play about 8 or 9 games a year. If that meant it was just that was just an amazing thing. His story has nothing to do with anything per se, but his Bo, gets that injury against the Bengals in the playoffs. Well, like a week later, I happened to have my knee scoped, and the doctor's Bob Rosenfeld was great, and I went by there. He's just going to look at my knee, and a wonderful guy, very good friends with. And he says, "Come on, I want to show you something." And he puts an X-ray up on the screen. I said, "What is that?" He said, "It's a hip." Well, he says, "That Bo's hip?" He says, "Yeah." So I'm thinking, I said, "What's all that black stuff?" He said, "Is that bad?" He said, "It's real bad." I said, "Is Bo done?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Would you call Al for me?" I said, "Not in a million years." You're wrong with that one. But I guess I was the second person to know that Bo's career in football had ended. So, but that was just it's sort of like I just miss not seeing the runs he would have made. I mean, it just he was so special in everything, just in baseball, obviously, and just so. There's my Bo Jackson story for you.
You know, it's so unfortunate that he was injured the way that he was. Clearly, obviously, because the great player that he was, and it was kind of a tragic end to just an absolutely skyrocketing career. But from a Raiders perspective, from an on-field perspective, it's unfortunate that it's in a kind of a long list of things that have happened to the Raiders, whether it's Rich Gannon getting his shoulder broken, or it's, the Tuck rule, or Derek Carr breaking his ankle, or, Bo Jackson with his hip injury, or what. It's like these moments, not only did they cost the Raiders, I feel, a game or a playoff or a potential Super Bowl run, but the ramifications, kind of the ripple effect of these things were massive. Like, it feels to me, as again, I'm sensitive to it because I'm a Raider fan, but it feels like other teams don't have these type of moments, these specific moments you could point at. Heck, the Immaculate Deception you could point at. Like, these moments that happen, and they just have this enormous ripple effect that not only impact the Raiders, but the league.
Well, I think you can include the trading of John Gruden into all of those things.
Yeah.
That is a little bit sort of self-inflicted. But, there was something, I know it was the NFL channel at one time did. I mean, there were about 4 or 5 plays that Raiders would have been 4 or 5 more Super Bowls had these things not occurred. And, there's some guys we lost in 1982. We lost to the Jets at home. We were just marching down the field. Mickey Marvin got a terrible penalty. The 85 against New England, we had a guy fumble 2 kickoffs. Close games throughout. Obviously, you brought up the Immaculate Reception. Yeah, it got a little spooky. And then the same thing, I used to, I didn't really get involved at all. The officials, they got it in for us. And, hey, I'll give you another one. It was the year before I got there. 77 was the Rob Lytle fumble by the Broncos, which if there was any replay, then, I mean, that very clearly the Raiders would have been, I think that was the championship game, would have gone to the 77 Super Bowl.
Yeah, and they would have smoked the Cowboys.
You can make a ton of lists. There was one thing I wanted to put in, they didn't put in our book, was that again, the Tuck game. There are a bunch of things that happened. If you go to the Jet game, in our last regular season game, we're playing the Jets. They need to beat us to get in the playoffs. If we win that game, I don't know if you remember the game at all. I mean, I don't know how far back you go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is before that season, before the end of the season. We win, we get a bye. We lose, we're going to play. So we're playing the Jets, and you can look at this, and it still drives me crazy. We have 3rd and 1, and we have this great short yardage thing with John Ritchie leading Zach Crockett, and we call a play action pass. And if we get the first down, game's over. And Roland Williams is all alone, 8 yards down the field, and Rich Gannon, who is just great, throws over his head by 5 feet. So if we win that game, we get the bye. The Jets will play New England, whoever plays New England, and the winner of that game comes out to Oakland. There's no There's no game in New England that game. So little things like that will drive you crazy. And then here's the other one.
And John, just to jump in on you on that 3rd and 1 play. So here's kind of the big extrapolation of it all. 1 3rd and 1 play, you could say, leads to John Gruden's dismissal. Like, I mean, right?
I mean, exactly. Yeah, because I really think if we had beaten New England, now we go to Pittsburgh, and we're not going to lose to Cordell Stewart at quarterback. We go to the Super Bowl. I think the Rams would have been tough because we didn't have the safeties New England did. But, how do you not sign your coach who takes you to a Super Bowl? But just to drive yourself crazier in that Tuck game, first of all, we have another 3rd and 1 against New England. And, again, they can't stop us at 3rd and 1 with Ritchie and Crockett. And so we got 3rd and 1. And what happens, Frank Middleton's right guard, and he's supposed to block Richard Seymour. Well, for some reason, he forgets Seymour, and it's the most basic play. He goes after the linebacker. Richard Seymour comes in up a lot. John Ritchie, gets stuck, and we don't get the first down. Now, so if he blocks the right guy, we got the first down, game's over. Now, Al always brought this up about we had 2nd and 10, and Charlie Garner runs the ball, and Garner said the same way. If he had cut left instead of right or right instead of left, he's still running. The game's over there. Now, this is the one that nobody really notices. On the tuck play, there was about like a minute and 52 seconds to go in the game when that tuck play happened. If that play had happened 9 seconds earlier, outside of the 2-minute warning, they would not have reviewed it. Because back then the rule was they did not review all turnovers. Number one. Number two, New England was out of timeouts, so they couldn't, throw a flag to review the play. But inside 2 minutes, they reviewed it upstairs. So for 9 seconds, I mean, there's the three things that just drive you crazy. That there would have been no tuck thing, and maybe John stays, and history has changed. So it's just they show the game a lot on the NFL. I can't watch it. I still get nauseous watching it just because of such things. For the want of a nail, the shoe was lost, etc. The battle was lost, the war was lost. So there's my philosophy.
Wow. Well, that is just some amazing insight, and you're right. Just the amount of things that led up to all of that. It truly is a game of inches, right? This is where the details count and the small things add up and turn into big things. And now with Gruden's return, I mean, obviously the most poetic send-off for the Raiders out of Oakland would be for him to bring them a championship. We're going to get at least one more year there, maybe two, in Oakland before the Raiders depart to Vegas. And one of the things I want to ask you about, John, before we let you go, is you were right in the middle of the Raiders' first move. You were there when they moved to L.A., and you were there when they moved back. And what are some of the similarities or differences or that you see? What is it, give us an overall view of what that looks like for a team that is going to move. And of course, you all won a championship right after moving to Los Angeles. So obviously it didn't impact the play on the field too much, but give us some idea. Just give us kind of what your view is on the Raiders leaving and heading to Vegas.
Well, it's sad. I mean, it's sad. It's a special group. I've been to various booster clubs, and I'm genuinely truly great fan. I ask the difference, what Al would have done under the situation as opposed to Mark. And I really think the only difference is that Al, I think, would have given Oakland a really legitimate shot to keep the Raiders here. And again, I wasn't involved in it, but I got the impression that there's really nothing Oakland could have done to change their minds. I think it's a hard to turn down. It's a hell of an offer that Vegas has made with it. I mean, they're putting up an incredible amount of money, $750 million for the stadium. And, so I think they're kind of excited about it. Now, we made the move to L.A., and again, it was kind of sad, but there's been such a build-up to it. The irony, the team actually practiced in Oakland all of 1982 and then flew down for every game. So basically we had a road game every year. I think except, ironically, I think it was against the 49ers. Going to Candlestick was like a home game.
Oh, yeah.
Trip. Essentially, they flew to every game. And I think that we did the same thing down in L.A. And I think the difference was going to L.A., we had a really good team, with Plunkett and Marcus and Cliff. The whole thing was a very good team. Coming back to Oakland from L.A., it wasn't a good team. And, I think that made it that much more difficult. So, it's tough. I think, you're a lame duck team in the city for 2 years. I think that's why, hiring John was such a smart move. It's really going to, palliate, the negative feelings the Raiders fans were going to have. And I think if they hadn't done it, I think there might have been a real, almost a fan rebellion in purchasing tickets this year. So I think, and I think John is going to bring so much, so much energy and such. Now, on the negative side, or the side, maybe sort of a heads up, you got a new coach with a new system with a lot of new players. That's tough. That is, with new players, new system, new coaches. There's a real adjustment there. So, I'm rooting. So again, I'm a big fan of John's, and I certainly hope it does well. But it may take that first year to really adjust to it. But I think the most important thing is going to happen is the way John's going to coach Derek Carr. Now, again, I'm looking from the outside, and Derek Carr, wants to be the leader, does all the right things, but in a sense, when they would have a bad game, it's my fault, blame me, it's my fault, don't blame it, it's my fault. Well, I think he's going to make him more into a Rich Gannon type of a leader. And a guy blows an audible, runs the wrong pattern, doesn't make the blitz pickup. Rich will chew your ass out right there on the field, and I think that's something that Derek really needs to do, and I think that's going to be a real strength for him and an improvement in not letting players get away with stuff on the field and holding the players accountable. So that to me is that might be the best thing.
Yeah, you like the humility of a Derek Carr, right, in that aspect, and you want your leaders to have a certain amount of that to them. But you're right, when you look at the greats, whether it's Marino or Elway or Rich Gannon, people like they hold their players accountable. They're not afraid to get on them a little bit, and I think that's definitely something that you don't want them to have be these overriding a-holes, but you want somebody to you want to take charge a little bit and to hold players accountable. And I'm with you. I think that Gruden's definitely going to bring that to Derek Carr's leadership. Where his skill set there, his toolbox there, and I think that's gonna help out a lot. So John, thank you. I can't thank you enough for joining us here on Raiders Fan Radio. I can listen to you tell stories about the Raiders all day, and I said this to you last time, and I mean it as well. I hope you come back and join us once again because this has been great. But before we let you go, last question for you: what's next for you? Are you got another book in you? Are you looking to rejoin the NFL? Are you just enjoying retirement? Like, tell us what's next on the horizon for John Kingdon.
I have a special needs son that's taken up a lot of time, me and my wife, and just to keep busy, I'm doing I cover sports for a local paper, which is kind of fun. It's a weekly paper, the La Marinda Weekly out here, LaMarindaWeekly.com. Anyone wants to read what's going on locally, but I don't know. We're sort of debating a book maybe further behind the Raider Shields, and I started making a list of next time John. He was a little reticent to talk to this, but was very supportive. But I've made a list. Maybe talk with Marcus directly and people that work there, and Frank Middleton, get him, and Rich Gannon, and et cetera, et cetera. So maybe further behind the Raider Shield, we'll come up with that at some point.
Well, I think that'd be fantastic. I know Raider Nation would love it. We love the first book. It's Behind the Raider Shield. It's yourself. It's Bruce Kebrick, Steve Corcoran, firsthand accounts of the times of Al Davis and working with the organization, and it's a phenomenal read. I can't recommend it enough, and so Raider Nation, definitely check it out. You can find it on Amazon, or it's at BehindTheRaidersShield.net. He's John.
It's BehindTheShield.net is what it's called.
Oh, BehindTheShield.net. I'm sorry. Okay, BehindTheShield.net. No. And so yes, please check it out there. And thanks again, John. This has been great. And we look forward to catching up with you again soon, and maybe when the season gets started, we'll get you back on here on Raiders Fan Radio if you're up to it.
It's fun to talk to a genuine fan like yourself, man. A lot of fun.
Oh well, I appreciate that very much. We thank you again, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks,
yes, sir.
Much. Super.
The Raiders stood at 2-1 with one game to go in the first quarter of the season. The final game of those opening four would come at the Network Associates Coliseum as the young Cleveland Browns brought a surprising 2-1 record of their own into the game. Even more surprising to the Raiders would be how easily quarterback Tim Couch took the Browns right down the field on their very first possession of the game, culminating the drive with a touchdown pass to Darren Cheverini. The Browns' 7-0 lead served as a wake-up call to the Raiders, whose offense then answered the bell in a very big way.
Double tight ends, Wheatley up the middle. Wheatley at the goal line. Wheatley is in. Touchdown Raiders. Tyrone Wheatley kept driving and driving.
With the score tied at 7, Gannon found Andre Rison.
Andre Rison is in. He's left with Brown. They're going to throw out left. Caught by Rison. 50. Up the sideline 40. Makes a move 30. One man to beat 20. Now to the middle, and he's down on the 12-yard line.
Now up 14-7. The Raiders went back to Tyrone Wheatley.
First down and goal from the 2-yard line. Ritchie ahead of Wheatley. Wheatley's got it up the middle, and Wheatley's into the end zone again. Touchdown, Tyrone Wheatley.
Not to be outdone, the Raider defense got into the act as well when Willie Thomas put 7 more on the board.
Couch back to pass, looking middle. Now fires out right, intercepted by Willie Thomas, and he will take it in for a touchdown. 10-5, touchdown, Willie Thomas. A 45-yard interception return. He goes directly to the black hole.
Thomas managed to make it out of the black hole to talk about his run to the end zone and his thoughts on playing on the offense for Coach Gruden.
He always said that I could play tight end for him, but we never followed through on the suggestion. But hey, when I get a chance to make a play, and I love catching the balls, it's fun because you get a chance to be on offense when you catch the ball. So that's the way I think of it, and just have a good time.
But as Coach Gruden pointed out, Thomas wasn't the only one looking for a good time on the offensive side of the ball.
Woodson wants to play offense. Willie T wants to play offense. Hell, Grady Jackson wants to be the goal line fullback, Greg. But we're just going to try to keep moving ahead, keep our eyes focused on the bye week. Let's use it logically to get ready for the 49ers, and we'll see what happens.
Dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate!
Hey, Raider Nation, are you out there? It's Uncle Mosh. I got a couple questions for you. Hey, what are you wearing right now? Nah, this isn't getting all weird. I'm sitting here and I'm sporting my Raiders Fan Radio shirt. That's right, we got merchandise now. And you too can have one of these nice, I'm saying, Raiders Fan Radio shirts by going to RaidersFanRadio.com. I mean, who wouldn't want to wear one of our shirts? You need to do this, and you need to do it quick. You know why? Because the price is set right now. It's set so low. It's so low, we're afraid that it's going to go up faster than an avocado sandwich at a 49er play date. You know what? Even the redheaded cousin wears one of these when he's not drinking the donkey Kool-Aid. All right, get out there. Order your shirt. RaidersFanRadio.com. I need the money.